Dreamchasers, The Gift of Visions. Written by Daniel J. Adams. Narrated by Keaton Jones. Chapter 1. Zoned Out. It was the month of April. A full moon shone brightly in the cloudless sky. Thanks to the city lights, only a few cars could be seen. The night was chilly, but it was the kind of chilly that made you want to pull on your favorite hoodie and hang out on the porch with your friends. Along with our footsteps, the only other sounds I could hear were a few crickets singing in the background and an occasional car passing by. The night felt perfect. I was nervous, my hands shaking and sweaty. I looked over at Presley as she walked next to me with her arm wrapped around mine. She looked so good, it made it hard for me to breathe. She was wearing a dark green prom dress, about the same color as her brilliant eyes. Her perfectly curled brown hair bounced as she walked, and her big smile beamed at me as she caught my gaze. We had just finished dancing the night away at our high school prom, and I was now slowly walking her up to the front door of her house. I walked slowly because I had seen this moment in all the movies and TV shows. It was the moment that would either make me the happiest or the most miserable guy alive. I don't know anyone who would want to rush that. We climbed the steps to the front door and stopped. We turned to face each other, the porch light shining right above our heads. "I honestly had the time of my life tonight, Chaz," Presley said, staring into my eyes. "Me too," I replied, trying not to avoid her gaze too much. She reached out and grabbed my hands. "You were such a fun date, and your dance moves are pretty cool." "Thanks." That was all I managed to get out of my mouth. The suspense of the moment was killing me. "Today has been just about perfect. You've been such a gentleman and so sweet to me. There's probably only one thing that could make it better." "Yeah? What's that?" I asked as she moved a little closer. I could tell from her shaky hands that she was getting just as nervous as I was. I asked what it was, but I already knew the answer. I just couldn't believe it was really happening. I knew exactly what to do, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. My heart hammered so hard in my chest, I felt like I was going to choke. I had better make my move before things got awkward. I closed my eyes and started to move in, and Chavez. I opened my eyes and I was no longer with Presley on her porch. I was in my high school geography class, and it wasn't even April. It was March, and the prom was still a month away. Disappointed, I looked around my classroom, taking in the bland walls covered in maps and posters of foreign countries. I turned my attention to my classmates and saw the usual scene of everyone trying not to fall asleep to Mr. Durham's lecture. Turning to my left, I found one of my best friends, Isaac, staring at me with an annoyed look on his face. Normally, Isaac wore a small grin on his face like he knew everyone thought he was the coolest in school. And he actually kind of was. He was good-looking and tall. He had tan skin and an athletic build. And on top of it all, he knew how to make everyone laugh. "Chaz, I thought you said you were going to quit doing that," Isaac whispered, replacing his annoyed look with a grin. "I almost had to resort to using your full name to get you back to reality." My full name was Chavez Matthew Anderson, but only my family and close friends knew that. Everyone else knew me as Chaz. I started going by Chaz when I realized that Chavez was actually a Hispanic last name. I wasn't Hispanic, and I already had a last name. "Well," I replied with a fake smile, "I'm still working on it. Judging from how you zoned out while talking about prom and how long you were gone, I'm pretty sure I know what you were thinking about." He started making kissy faces. "Daydreaming about it isn't going to make it come true. You do realize that, don't you?" "Yeah, I know. It's just that we've been good friends for so long, you know? I'm not really sure how to go about it now." Hello? You can ask her to prom." "That's true, but..." I stopped short when the lights turned off. Everyone knew what that meant. Mr. Durham was done lecturing, and it was time to watch a funny video that had nothing to do with the lesson just because he had run out of things to say. Everyone who had been asleep or falling asleep was now sitting up in their chairs, turning their attention towards the screen. I turned back to Isaac and said, "We'll talk about it later." "Okay, man," he replied. I tried to pay attention during the rest of class, but not even an intense video of someone almost getting eaten by a shark could keep me from thinking about Presley. I kept daydreaming about her and how I was going to ask her to prom. I couldn't completely zone out like I did earlier thanks to Isaac, who every few minutes would whisper something like, "Chaz, dude, are you watching this? This video is nuts!" Before I knew it, class was over and the bell started to ring. Isaac and I quickly put our things into our backpacks and joined the rush of students moving out the door. The halls of Pleasant Valley High School were swarming with students scurrying off in all directions, heading to lunch. The school's colors of green and white covered the floors and walls like ridiculous abstract art. But other than that, it looked just like any other high school. There were bulletin boards on the walls covered in flyers, pictures, and other random stuff no one paid attention to. "We having lunch with Presley and Jake today?" I asked as we walked through the halls, dodging students. "You know it, just like we always do." "Why do you ask? You thinking of popping the question during lunch?" I laughed. "No way, man. I can't just ask her the old-fashioned way. I've got to do something really unique." I stopped right next to the entrance of the men's restroom. Isaac stopped a couple feet ahead and looked back. "I'm gonna go to the bathroom really quick." "I'll be right here, man," he called after me. If only he knew the real reason I was going in there. I had to make sure I was looking good for Presley. Once I reached the mirror, I immediately began to fix my curly brown hair, making sure that every curl was in the right place, with most of it out of my face, and just a couple stray curls hanging right above my brown eyes. Once I was confident my hair was just right, I began examining my face just to make sure everything looked how it was supposed to. If it wasn't for the fact that I was 6'1", then no one would have believed that I was in high school. I had always been told that I had a baby face. As I stared in the mirror, I started to wonder what I would look like years from now, and what life would be like. Before I knew it, I completely zoned out. I looked at the clock on the dashboard and read 4:36 p.m. I was driving down the road in a beautiful gated neighborhood surrounded by trees and bushes. The brown brick houses were all large with long driveways, perfectly green lawns, and big garages, probably hiding nice cars, boats, and other fun toys. A few of the houses had white fences surrounding the backyard with dogs barking behind them, but most of the houses had their backyards open, and every so often, a deer would wander through. It had been a long day at work, and I was pretty tired, but at the same time, I was so excited to get home to my family and be with them. I drove the car up the driveway to a house that looked very similar to the rest and pulled into the garage. Getting out of the car, I headed inside. The first thing I noticed as I walked in was the familiar smell of my wife's homemade lasagna, which was my favorite. I walked down the white-walled hall with mahogany wood flooring and found myself in the living room. The room was spacious, with a fireplace at one end and a large television at the other. In the middle of the room were light gray couches atop a large blue and white area rug. All kinds of toys and knickknacks were strewn over the rug and furniture, and among the clutter sat two young boys with curly brown hair. "Daddy!" they both screamed when they finally noticed me there. They jumped up, dropped their toys, and ran over to me, giving my legs a big hug. My heart felt so happy as I took a minute to look at both of their faces. They looked like younger versions of me. "Dad, will you play a game with us?" the younger of the two asked as he squeezed my leg. "Of course I will," I replied with a big smile. "But not until after dinner, okay?" "Okay," he said, letting go of my leg. The two ran back over to their toys and resumed playing. Man, was I hungry. I headed into the kitchen to take a peek at the source of the smell. Entering, I saw that the table was set with plates and utensils, as well as a large green salad. A sparkly chandelier hung above the dinner table. It was covered with candle-shaped lights. I turned to my left to find a woman pulling the lasagna out of the oven. Just from the look of her beautiful brown hair, I already knew who she was. It was the same brown hair I had been staring at since 5th grade. "Chaz, bro, wake up," someone said as they shook my shoulder hard. I opened my eyes and saw my familiar 15-year-old reflection in the mirror. Isaac was standing behind me with his hand on my shoulder. "Really, Chaz?" he asked with a dumbfounded look. "You can't even take a trip to the bathroom without zoning out?" "I'm sorry," I replied, feeling a little annoyed. I didn't bother explaining myself to him. He always ruined the best daydreams. "It seems like you're doing that more and more lately. I don't think it's healthy, man." "Sorry, I'll try harder." "It's all good, bro. I'm just trying to be a good friend." "Well, you've already proven yourself with all those times you've attempted to be my wingman." We both shared a laugh before leaving the restroom. We walked down the hall and headed through the glass doors into the parking lot. Right outside the door, we found Presley and Jake waiting. Jake was wearing his usual eccentric button-up with uncomfortably short shorts. Presley was looking as good as she always did in her green shirt and denim shorts. "Hey, you two," Presley said, smiling at me. "There you guys are," Jake said. "Let's go to lunch." "The lounge?" I asked. The lounge was our favorite fast food restaurant, and we usually went there when we went out for lunch. It wasn't as comfy as it sounds, but it was cheap and good, so that's where we went. "Yup," Jake replied as he headed towards the mass of parked cars. The three of us followed right behind him. We wove through the cars to the corner of the parking lot until we found Jake's gray Jeep. "Shotgun," Isaac called out as he ran to the passenger seat. He opened the door and winked at me before getting in. I had a pretty good idea of why he was winking. I was a little nervous just thinking about sitting in the back with Presley. Yeah, I did all the time, but I always thought that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time she would whisper sweet nothings in my ear as she fell asleep on my shoulder. Just kidding. That would be really weird. I decided that I would start trying to be a gentleman around her, so I opened the door for her. "Thanks, Chaz," she said, stepping inside the vehicle. I rushed around to the other side and hopped in. Jake sped out of the parking lot and off we went. I looked over at Presley and found her looking out the window. Now would be a good time to find out if she had been asked to prom. But of course, I had to be cool about it. "So, Presley, have you been asked to prom yet?" Isaac asked from the passenger seat. There he goes again, working the wingman like it was his full-time job. That's why we were best friends. "Yeah, 4 times, I think," Presley replied. "But I turned them all down." Isaac didn't seem to catch the sarcasm in her voice. He looked back impressed. "For real?" "No," she laughed. "I haven't been asked yet." "Well, that's okay. I'm sure you will be soon." Call me crazy, but I'm pretty sure he gave me a telepathic fist bump after that. "Yeah," I added. "I'm sure there's lots of guys planning on asking you." "Hopefully. Do any of you know who you're going to ask?" "I'm planning on asking Lindsay Gerber tomorrow," Jake answered as he turned the Jeep into the lounge parking lot. "I'm not sure yet," Isaac said. "There's too many options. I have to make a pros and cons list for each girl I'm interested in." The three of us laughed because we knew he was serious. Presley looked over at me, probably because I hadn't said anything yet. What a perfect time to reveal that I wanted to ask her. She was practically begging me to do it. "What about you, Chaz?" "Let's go eat," Jake interrupted as he opened his door. "We can talk about all this stuff inside." "Darn it, Jake." "Well, I probably wouldn't have done it anyway, but you never know. Crazy stuff happens every day." Inside, we were met with the smell of burgers and probably a mixture of other unhealthy things. The restaurant was spacious, with bright orange walls, blue tables surrounded by comfy-looking booth seats, and a few television sets hanging around the room. We approached the cashier, and I stared up at the giant menu above her head. "Hi, how can I help you?" she asked cheerfully. One by one, we ordered, starting with Jake, Isaac, and then Presley. When Presley reached into her pocket to pull out some money to pay, I decided it was another good time to work my magic. I stepped up next to her, handed the cashier a $20 bill, and said, "I've got hers." A surprised smile broke across her face. "Chaz, that's so nice of you, but it's okay. I can pay for mine, and I should be the one buying for you. After all, it's your birthday tomorrow." "Well, you can buy me lunch then," I replied. I was feeling really good about myself. Man, was I smooth. I was also broke. That was the last of my cash. "That works for me. Thanks, Chaz." Presley started towards the table Jake and Isaac were sitting at as I accepted my change from the cashier. I used what was left to pay for my order. As the cashier sorted through the money I gave her, I started to think about what I was going to say when Presley brought up prom again. "So, Chaz," Presley began, "you never told me who you plan on asking to the dance." She sat across the table from me, staring into my eyes. Why did she have to be so darn cute? It made it so much harder to have a normal conversation. Whatever, I gotta be smooth. Smooth Chaz is the only Chaz with a date to the prom. "Well," I said, pausing, "I was actually planning on asking you." "Chaz, asking a girl to prom isn't something to joke about." She was teasing me, but I could tell by the look on her face that she was a little hopeful. I laughed. "No, I really mean it. I just wasn't totally sure how to go about it." "You really wanted to ask me?" "Hello?" a feminine voice said. "You okay?" I came back to reality and found myself staring awkwardly at the cashier as she tried to hand me my change. "Sorry," I said as I grabbed my change from her. I was just thinking. I pocketed the change and headed over to join my friends. As soon as I sat down, one of the employees called out Jake's order, so he jumped up to grab it. Right after that, Isaac's order was ready, so he too headed over to grab his. "So, Chaz," Presley began, "you never told me who you plan on asking to the dance." Well, the way I pictured this moment was right on the money. Now the question was, could I be as smooth as I was when I imagined this moment? I contemplated my response until I realized it had been an awkward 30 seconds or so that I hadn't replied. I'm not sure yet. Both of our orders were then called out. "I got it," I said as I rose from the table. I had blown the moment. I would just have to ask her another way. After we all sat down, we discussed my birthday and what I had planned. When Presley found out I didn't have any plans besides eating cake with my family, she insisted that we go out and do something fun. Jake and Isaac liked the idea as well. As weird as it sounds, I had a bad feeling inside my chest when she brought it up, but I just ignored it. What's wrong with spending my birthday with my friends?